The Galactic Combat Academy had seen many species pass through its reinforced doors. Krillians with their forearms and tactical precision, Vextorians with their crystalline armor and hive mind coordination, even the mysterious Shadowkin, who could bend light itself to their advantage. But in its 200-year history, the Academy had never before accepted a human instructor. Nova stood in the training courtyard, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, watching the latest batch of recruits with calm brown eyes. The Cubs, as the Academy affectionately called first-year cadets, were a mixed group of 12 young aliens from 6 different species. Today was their first day of practical combat training, and Nova had already spotted a problem. The equipment room was a disaster. Training staffs lay scattered across the floor. Protective gear hung haphazardly from hooks, or had been abandoned in piles. The foam practice mats were rolled up incorrectly, creating trip hazards. It was the kind of chaos that would get someone injured before training even began. Nova clapped her hands together once, the sharp sound cutting through the excited chatter. 12 pairs of eyes, some multiple sets per individual, turned toward her. "Before we begin today's session," Nova announced, her voice carrying easily across the courtyard, "we're going to tidy up the equipment room properly." A collective groan rippled through the group. Rexy, a young Dracorian with copper-colored scales and eyes that glowed faintly amber, raised a clawed hand. Dracorians were proud warrior species, descended from apex predators on a high-gravity world. They weren't accustomed to manual labor. "Instructor Nova," Rexy said, his translator rendering his hissing speech into standard galactic. "We are combat cadets, not custodial workers. The cleaning drones are offline for maintenance," Nova interrupted smoothly. "And even if they weren't, you'd still be doing this. A warrior who can't maintain their own equipment and training space isn't a warrior. They're a liability." She walked toward the equipment room, and after a moment of hesitation, the Cubs followed. What happened next would become legend at the Academy. Nova hadn't specified how to clean the room. She'd simply said, "Tidy up," and left them to it while she reviewed the day's training protocols on her datapad. It was a test, though the Cubs didn't know it yet. How they approached an unstructured task would tell her everything about their problem-solving skills and teamwork. 20 minutes later, she heard the screaming. Nova sprinted toward the equipment room, her hand instinctively going to the training baton at her belt. She burst through the door and stopped dead, her mouth falling open. The room had become a foam apocalypse. Bubbles filled the air in massive floating clouds. The floor was slick with suds that came up to her ankles. And in the center of it all stood the Cubs, absolutely covered in soap foam, looking like bizarre marshmallow creatures from a children's story. Rexy stood frozen near what had once been the cleaning supply cabinet, his copper scales now hidden beneath a thick layer of white foam. Only his glowing amber eyes were visible, blinking in confusion. "What," Nova said slowly, "happened here?" A small Pequary cadet, a species known for their technical aptitude but not their common sense, raised a tentative appendage. Foam dripped from what might have been fingers. "We found the industrial cleaning solution," the Pequary squeaked. "The container said it was highly concentrated. We thought that meant it would clean better. How much did you use?" Nova asked, though she was already afraid of the answer. "All of it?" Rexy offered weakly, foam sliding off his snout as he spoke. Nova closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then another. When she opened them again, she found herself looking at 12 miserable, soap-covered aliens who clearly expected punishment. Instead, she started laughing. It began as a chuckle, but quickly grew into full, genuine laughter that echoed off the foam-covered walls. The Cubs stared at her in confusion. Humans, they'd heard, were unpredictable. But this seemed extreme even by those standards. "Instructor?" Rexy ventured carefully. Nova wiped her eyes, still grinning. "Do you know what I love about humans?" she asked, not expecting an answer. "We make mistakes. Constantly. Spectacularly. We mess up so often that we've become really good at fixing our messes." She rolled up her sleeves. "But more importantly, we've learned that mistakes are how you learn. Right now, you're learning exactly why you read instructions on industrial chemicals. You're learning about dilution ratios. You're learning that more doesn't always mean better." Nova stepped into the foam, feeling it squish under her boots. "And now you're going to learn how to clean this up, properly, together." What followed was an education in practical problem-solving that no simulation could have provided. Nova showed them how to turn off the water supply, How to create drainage channels in the foam, how to work as a team with different physical capabilities to tackle a large-scale problem. She taught them about ventilation, about protective equipment, about the importance of knowing your materials. 4 hours later, the equipment room gleamed. Not only had the Cubs cleaned up their foam disaster, but they'd organized every piece of equipment with military precision. The practice mats were rolled and stored correctly. The protective gear hung in species-specific sections. The training weapons were arranged by type and size. The Cubs stood at attention, exhausted but proud. Even Rexy's scales seemed to shine a bit brighter, though that might have been residual soap. Nova inspected their work with a critical eye, then nodded. Outstanding. This is what I wanted to see from the beginning. Not perfection, but effort, adaptation, and teamwork. She paused, meeting each set of eyes in turn. The Galactic Combat Academy chose me as your instructor, not because humans are the strongest species, or the fastest, or the most naturally talented warriors. They chose me because humanity has learned something valuable through thousands of years of mistakes. We learned that failure isn't the end of training, it's the beginning. We learned that the warrior who can adapt, who can fix their mistakes, who can turn a disaster into a learning opportunity, is worth 10 warriors who never faced adversity. Rexy stepped forward, his posture straighter despite his exhaustion. Instructor Nova, I understand now why you didn't punish us for the foam incident. Oh, who said I wasn't going to punish you? Nova replied with a slight smile. Tomorrow morning, 0500 hours, you're all going to write detailed reports on proper cleaning solution-dilution ratios. And you're going to explain, in technical detail, exactly what went wrong and how to prevent it. The collective groan was music to her ears. But that punishment comes with a reward, she continued. You've just completed your first real lesson in combat training. Because here's what every human warrior knows. The battlefield is chaos. Plans fall apart. Equipment fails. Situations spiral out of control. She gestured at the now pristine equipment room. And the warrior who survives isn't always the one with the best training or the sharpest claws. It's the one who can look at a room full of foam and figure out how to turn it back into a functional space. As the Cubs filed out, still picking soap bubbles from their various appendages, Nova heard Rexy talking quietly to the Pikri cadet. I think I'm beginning to understand why the other species fear humans in combat, Rexy said thoughtfully. Because they're unpredictable? The Pikri asked. No, Rexy replied. Because they see every disaster as just another problem to solve. And they never stop solving problems until they win. Nova smiled to herself as she secured the equipment room. Tomorrow they would begin actual combat training. But today, the Cubs had learned something far more valuable than fighting techniques. They'd learned what it meant to train under a human instructor. And they'd learned that sometimes the best lessons come covered in soap.